moss or no moss, and trim or no trim. These are our hot topics for today. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kim and I grow orchids outdoor in Zone 9A, Texas Gulf Coast area. Let's clean up some Vandas today.
My friends, it's time for the game plan.
Alright, so our game plan is first we have to talk about moss or no moss on Vanda roots, because in our cleaning process we are going to decide to remove or keep the moss. And second, we will trim dead roots off, and we are also going to talk about trimming overgrown healthy roots. And third, we'll resecure the wires on the Vandas. So let's get going, and oh yeah, no coffee for me or I won't sleep for 2 days. Let's talk about the practice of using moss on orchid roots. I do think that the moss does some good when you drape it over the Vanda roots. I think that it increases the surface area that can collect water for the nearby roots to benefit from, and in turn, it increases the humidity around the root zones. There are some nurseries in South America that do use moss to drape over their roots. The orchid roots, and the moss it acts as a shading cloth or a shading mechanism for the roots, because some Vandas are kept in direct sunlight. However, the growers do recommend using the moss sparingly to prevent choking the roots of the Vandas. And lastly, the moss does help the orchids look more full, so it is an aesthetic purpose. And for me, I'm starting to question, though, whether the moss is stealing too much of the fertilizers. I don't fertilize the Vandas very much. I don't soak them with a bucket of fertilizer solution because that's a bit expensive for me. And so instead, I spray with the CRAFTSMAN battery-powered sprayer, and the orchid doesn't get a lot of fertilizer. I try to come back a second time, of course, to spray again after I'm done with all the orchids if I have enough fertilizer. And when I spray the fertilizer, it tends to get on the moss, and then the moss, in many cases, is blocking the liquid fertilizer from getting direct path to the Vanda roots. So leave me a comment below and let me know what you think about using moss on your Vandas. It's not as clear-cut as it seems. Let's start with this big Vanda Verruth hybrid. Now, I do know that this orchid does not like the moss, so I think we'll go ahead and remove it. This large Vanda has issues with the roots every year, and it's always around this moss area. Not sure if the roots dry out or die or smother from lack of airflow, and the new roots from above the bad roots tend to weave away from the moss and outward like it wants to sprawl away. The orchid was given to me with moss on it, so I left it there and just cleaned it up every year like I'm doing now. It had moss on it at least 2 years now, but it doesn't seem to work well for my setup. I'm going to try to remove most of the bad part as a large cluster. Incidentally, this orchid has so many keikis because I stressed it and accidentally had it in too much sun one day. And secondly, this orchid tends to give a lot of keiki even when it's healthy. If all the keikis grow, I will have lots of Vandas to spare, so I may do some radical root trimming on one of them when it gets big enough, and we'll keep it trimmed short on a regular basis. Now, trimming the roots will also encourage the roots to bisect and branch out new roots where the cut is made, so we will need to consider that. And then secondly, keeping the roots short may also keep the overall height of the trunk of the orchid shorter. The main body is what I'm referring to as the trunk. Let me know in the comments section what you think about root trimming on Vandas. And I don't mean the obvious dry root, dead root trimming, but cutting back healthy, long, overgrown roots. All right, next we clean up this Vanda Pachar Delight. The moss does not seem to negatively affect this orchid, and the moss has been on this orchid for over a year now. But to be fair, though, this Vanda has a plastic pot to keep the roots spread out more and allow airflow. We'll just go ahead and remove all the moss because of the fertilizer situation I had discussed earlier. We can do this one pretty quick. I could support healthy root trimming as a normal practice, especially if some roots are too long and difficult to manage. It might seem that it's very radical, but I don't really think that it's as harmful as it may seem. However, you may like the long roots, and I certainly do, but I also like the ease of handling a plant. From my experience, a healthy Vanda can easily tolerate some root breakage, as it had several times happen. The large red Vanda Veruth hybrid, when my kids carried it out for me during the winter, they would accidentally step on the long roots and snap it off partly. And then second experience I've had with Vanda root trimming is with the Vanda Pachar Delight. Someone in the supply chain of selling this Vanda also had trimmed the Vanda roots. When I purchased it last year at Lowe's, it was severely trimmed back, and there were 2 spikes. And I don't know if there are any causes and effect from these 2 facts, but I did notice that the spike did not die off from any of the stress from roots being trimmed. I'm going to assume that the roots were trimmed first, and then the spikes came. But the snapshot of things as I purchased the Pachar Delight is that there are 2 spikes and roots severely trimmed back, and yet the plant bloomed for a long time. I hesitated when I saw how cut up the roots were, but I looked at the orchid and it seemed very healthy, and so I'm really glad I made that call to get it, because it definitely was a healthy orchid. I was able to get 1 spike this year off the Pachar Delight. Now, this orchid that I'm working on right now is Vanda Celestis times Koki, and originally purchased with many thin roots on it. The thick roots that you see are proudly from me, and we're cutting off the dead thin roots from last year's. I can't wait to see what the blooms will look like this year with these new thick roots and very succulent roots. All right, the next one we have here is pretty easy. Just need to trim some of the dead stuff off on there. Now this one only has 1 main roots and lots of side roots. Luckily there is a new lead up higher, and I'll remove more of the dead covering to help the new roots emerge. Once more new roots grow in along the main stem, then I will trim off the long roots to tidy up things. The new lead will be our insurance. The rest of the Vandas are pretty easy and straightforward, just trimming off dead roots. This one has a tie that is shredding, so we'll need to get a new secure tie for it. And it looks like this one also is a keki, actually. The main part is all rotten and dead. So I'm going to remove this dead part right here, just a little twisting around. Okay, maybe not. I need some help with the scissors after all. While we are wrapping things up, I want to give you an update on what other videos may be coming up in the next few weeks. I need to do an orchid in bloom video. A few orchids bloomed while I was away in Vietnam, and a few others also send up spikes, so I would like to show you some of those. I also have to make a compilation video of all the orchids I saw in Vietnam. Now keep in mind that the trip was not to go to see orchid places. What I took pictures of and videos of are orchids that I ran into while I was backpacking across the country. And those orchid pictures are from gardens and balconies of people's houses and front porches, and some are from hotels I stayed. Well, I hope everyone had a wonderful holiday and a happy belated New Year to you all. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.